One of the amusing things I've noticed that many Christians do on YouTube, and perhaps on the internet in general, is a sort of closing message that practically amounts to saying, "Someday you'll be sorry." Usually this message comes after an extended time of discussion and debate, when their points have been exhausted or debunked, or when it becomes clear that their evangelizing has no effect on you. It begins by stating the obvious. Well, I could keep at this until I'm blue in the face, and then producing some religious excuse for why their preaching has failed. But unless you're filled with the Spirit, you just won't understand. To top it all off, the message typically concludes with a warning. Just know that the truth remains, and one day you'll have to answer to Jesus. These types of comments reveal a lot about the way a person's mind works. In a world of more than 6 billion people, with 33% aligning themselves to Christian faith, the religion being popular for over 1,600 years, and the Bible being one of the best-selling books in history, it's fair to say that the odds are good that unless you're ministering to a native on a remote island, you are not the first person to share Christianity with them. In addition, it takes time and a good relationship with the person in order to breach their defensive walls and get them to even consider buying any personal testimony to the point of conversion. Witnessing to a stranger on the internet is unlikely to be successful, as many Christians are undoubtedly aware. The idea that a non-Christian fails to understand the value of what is being preached because they don't have the Spirit in them is something that reveals almost a belief in the magical power of preaching itself, as if no person can honestly understand the message without converting. The sad thing is that Christians will never respect such an argument for any other faith. Unless you're a Muslim, you can't understand Islam. Unless you're a Mormon, you can't understand Mormonism. Many Christians are very quick to dismiss other religions without ever partaking of them themselves. This is special pleading, and it's one way believers explain away their failure to convert someone or get them to accept their subjective evidence. The "someday you'll be sorry" message reminds me of how my brothers and I used to talk to each other when we were much younger. If one of us had done something to offend the other, we'd feel the need to emphasize the threat. "Just you wait, when Dad comes home you'll really be in trouble." Putting out this threat is more about the person making it than the one it's directed at. It's a weak attempt to muster up some vindication when you know quite well that you have no power. Since most Christians seem quite offended by blasphemy, I believe the intentions behind their threat are very similar. Knowing that they are pretty powerless to stop you from blaspheming, they try to stop it with a threat. "You're free to believe what you want now, but I hope you get things straight before Judgment Day." Like I said, though, this closing message is not for the unsaved, but for the believer. The major difference between it and a threat that your dad will be coming home angry is that Dad is a real person who's probably played the disciplinarian role before. What good does it do to threaten someone with a divine judgment they don't believe in? Hysterically, some Christians refuse to acknowledge even that, and assert that deep down atheists actually do know they'll be accountable. All of this betrays an inability to maturely handle disagreement. I may tell someone that they're ignoring the evidence, but what I don't resort to are cheap threats about being punished over disagreeing with me. I believe the truth should be accepted on its own merit, and I would rather people continue living in a fantasy world than be forced to accept reality at the edge of a sword or the barrel of a gun. Leave those terrorist tactics to religion. "Someday you'll be sorry" is a way religious believers reinforce their faith after they've not done so well in a debate, I've also noticed. It seems like saying, "You may have won this round, but you won't have the last laugh." When I was a Christian, I remember feeling superficially comforted by saying these things. Reflecting that God is ultimately in control is a lot easier to handle than reflecting on whether or not your worldview may actually be wrong. Because it's simply telling yourself that you are right, and one day the non-believers will see it too. As I said, these types of closing messages indicate an inability to deal maturely with disagreement and criticism. There's not really any single way to effectively respond to these messages, aside from pointing out the holes and assumptions in them, but I no longer feel a need to get the last word in edgewise. Perhaps it's a loss of insecurity that I had as a believer, perhaps it's knowing that my arguments speak for themselves better than any threat could, or perhaps it's simply having the maturity not to care. Whatever the case, someday we'll all be sorry when we pass through the trials of the duat and have to have our hearts weighed in accordance with Ma'at. Or perhaps we'll all just be dead.